All right, cool. Okay, good evening, guys. Gerald, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh my goodness. Guess what? I think it worked. All right, let me take that out. All right, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, cool. Now let me figure out how to get you on this side. For those of you guys wondering, once again, I am back to being challenged with devices. External facing. I don't know why I cannot hear you through my headphones. But you can hear me through the, you know what? I'm just not going to use that mic tonight then. Okay. We all set?
Yes, ma'am.
Just going to be plain Jane. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and go to my page and share this real quick because I was trying to get things set up and I missed that. And I'm going to take off lay video. There we go. There we go. Nope, still doing it. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being on. Boom. Tonight is our last night of week 2. And week 2, this is day 3. On the first night, we did family dynamics. And that was an awesome topic to jump into. And it was really, really cool to see how things work that you didn't think, it worked like that. And so to kind of hear from Chanel how those factors really play out in your family and how things travel and how things develop and become something new and something different. It was really cool to talk that out and see. So I was really pumped about that. Then the second night, last night, bomb.com on marriage. And we had Gerald here and we also had, oh Lord, blanking. Joyce, there we go. Gerald and Joyce, and they talked to us about marriage. And guys, I showed you my notes page when I was done. I have my own notes that were, written. And I just because, I'm in a marriage, but when I tell you there were so many cool things, cool takeaways to help anyone's marriage at any point, but especially during the pandemic. And it was really cool to hear these things. And how you're in a topic or how you're dealing with something and you hear advice and it's like, that's cool advice, but I don't know if it's really going to get done. These things that were said were practical, legit. They didn't sound too intimidating to where it's just like, dear God, who's going to do this for me? But it was cool to, have help that seemed doable, that seemed okay. I can manage that. That seemed, you remember Matilda? Did you ever watch that, Gerald?
Yes, I did.
All right. Remember, what was his name? Little boy and the chocolate cake. I can't think of his name right now.
I know. I can't remember his name either.
Bruce?
Might have been, yeah.
Just think about him, facing this gigantic chocolate cake. That's a huge thing to just tackle on his own. But last night, the way that everything was laid out, I promise you, it was so like, okay, cool, I can do it. And I was really, really, really glad to have that type of help from these two, super dynamic individuals sharing in their fields. So tonight, though, is our last night of week 2, and we are dealing, unfortunately, but so important, we're dealing with depression and suicide. And we all know it's crazy how relevant it becomes, especially in the holiday season. But what in the world is anyone supposed to do during a pandemic and a holiday season and racial tension and political tension and nobody has money and jobs? Just so many things that can offset people. Here comes depression and suicide again. Like, it's on time, unfortunately. This is when it pops up more. But now we have all these other factors. So we're jumping in that tonight. Got the chat open, guys. For those of you who don't know, like I said, challenged, I'm using Restream. Shame, I'm not getting any money for them for this. If I am, send it to my email. That's fine. But I'm using Restream, and so I'm able to see you guys' comments still on this page and platform as well. So if you guys have ever dealt with depression on your own, or you've dealt with depression with someone who in your family who has dealt with it, and you have seen things of, have stories of what it looked like or how your family dealt with it or how you dealt with it. If you are comfortable, please go ahead and share that in the comments. You never know who's reading it and who it will apply to. All right. So every person is going to deal with an experience in their own way, but you never know who can benefit from what. And so be willing to share. That'll be great to help out anybody from your experiences. So jumping into it, can you let me know, Gerald, what, and this is kind of just, real chill. In your experience, what are ways that depression can, what are some signs or what are some ways that people can identify depression? I'm just a regular chick. I'm just a regular dude. I'm going about my life. What are some things that I might see going on in my life that I could say, wait a minute, I think I might be dealing with something a little bit more than just a bad day?
That's a great question. I think when we think of the word depression, we often only associate the clinically diagnosed understanding of depression, and we're talking about people that need to take heavy medication because they can't function, right? But there is a huge swath of American culture that deals with depression, and we kind of push it off to just emotional, movements and, things that are happening. But depression, for the most part, affects most of the population from an undiagnosed perspective. So some of the things you're looking for are isolation. Okay. Anytime you don't want to be around people, that's a sign of depression, right? That's an indicator of depression. Another indicator of depression is from a psychological perspective. It's understood as anger that's turned inward, right? So anger, Freud defined it as anger turned inward is depression. That's really what depression is. So if you have unresolved emotions and things about something that's frustrating you and you internalize it over a period of time, that constant internalization, because you're not dealing with it, you can't confront the person or the situation, and you've turned it inside, you become more and more stoic, it's a sign of depression. It's a form of depression, literally. You're doing harm to yourself. And then, lastly, if you're looking at if you're evaluating yourself and you notice that for periods of time, you're kind of low and you're not really upbeat or happy, or people are just asking you all the time, are you okay? Are you okay? That kind of stuff. And then, the obvious things where if you're sleeping all the time, the physiological component of it, where your physical side is being affected by your mental side. So if you're sleeping in all the time, particularly if you don't have a 9 to 5, right? So you don't have to get up to go to work every day. So you're just sleeping in all the time in dark rooms and dark places, curtains drawn in the wintertime, that kind of stuff. And sometimes a lot of people experience mild forms of depression during wintertime, when the seasons change. Right. So those are some signs.
Yeah, a whole different setting.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, just mentioning just the seasonal part of it and just the weather part of it, for a lot of people, for me, I'll say moving, I was born and raised in California, and 2015 got married and moved to Kansas City. And there were a lot of different things, just like area wise, just the weather wise and just how the sky is and all those things. There were a lot of things that were different that just, weren't there with Cali vibes. Cali vibes, you just, flip flops and sunshine, you have your, your muggy days here and there, and it happens. But in Kansas City, you still have the sun, but it's a whole different vibe as far as, that type of area, growing up in that area. And the same thing for any other area you go to. And you just mentioning that made me think about that, because it's so easy to, you know, California flip-flops and sunshine it, you know, and it's easy for things to, can be easy for things to flow off or roll off your back when you've got the sun on your side, you know. But like you just mentioned, that weather thing is legit. It's a legit a factor, it seems, to affect that. Let me ask you this: for those who are who have been going through the pandemic and have been, you know, listening to the rules and actually staying inside as much as possible, at least, are there any other type of identifiers that may be specific to the pandemic, and just the factors of that would kind of give someone the notion I might have gone into a type of depression or something of that nature? Because, you know, it's a thing, like one of the things you mentioned was you might have gone into a depression if you're trying to stay away from people, you know, or if you're, like you said, like you're trying to be to yourself. We had to be to ourselves at this point.
Right.
There's some other things concerning, you know, being on shutdown, lockdown, that people may be able to say, hey, wait a minute, I think I might have experienced that and I might have gone into that. What are some other identifiers?
Well, I think just that in itself. So I think right now, because circumstances require that we do these things, we're not going to see them as identifiers. But I think when the pandemic is over, if we're still moving in these movements, like we're under lockdown, so we're not communicating, we're using different forms of communication as opposed to face-to-face in-person communication. Or if we're self-isolating when we no longer have to self-isolate, that's an indicator that you're coming out of the pandemic in a depressed mode, and you're not snapping out of it. You're still in it. So if post-pandemic you're still pandemic, your behaviors are still in pandemic form, then you need to be guarded against that. You need to be mindful of that. So if you're not going to the park, you're not meeting up with friends, if you're not like, oh my God, I couldn't wait to get out to the bar and meet with my friends, or I couldn't wait to get back to church and hug somebody. If these things are not like on your list for things you want to do, then that's a definite indicator that you should be checking your emotional state, taking a self-inventory of your emotional state.
How can someone do that?
Journaling, like I said last night, I think journaling is the key, man. I think it really helps you, because you in writing speak what you don't speak in words, right? So if you've ever had to write a term paper and you wrote the paper, your writing voice is different than the voice you speak in the vernacular you speak with people, right? Your writing voice comes from your inside mind. Where your speaking voice comes from a social perspective. So you're interacting with people and you're speaking socially. You use euphemisms, you'll use slangs, you'll use all sorts of different ways that you communicate from a social level. But when you write, your writing goes to like your inner soul. Like you write about your deepest pains, you write about your greatest joys. So when you journal, you're journaling your emotions. And when you channel your emotions through writing, when you go back and read that, that's a great indicator to see where you were emotionally. So that's, I think, probably the biggest tool you can use to determine where you are, or to measure that, where are you, right? You know, so every day you ask the honest question, you know, how am I feeling today? And then you write, you just be honest. You have to be willing to be honest with yourself. And if you're honest to yourself, when you go back and read that journal, you know you spoke the truth about yourself.
Right. And it's not a thing of I was BSing myself to myself.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to do that, because your inner conscious is like, really though? No.
Well, I'm standing right here. I can see you.
Exactly.
I'm gonna turn off your camera for a second and turn it back on.
Yeah, it froze. Yeah, my camera froze.
Uh-oh. Is it still there? I don't know. Are you still there though?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, it's going off and then coming back on, I think. All right, cool. All right, if you guys are checking this out at all, go ahead and let us know if you've ever, like I said earlier, if you've ever dealt with depression. I know this is not a fun topic to just raise your hand and say, hey, that's me. But I will let you know that we lost Gerald. He's coming back. I'm going to shoot that link to him again. I will let you know that the more that people share that their own experiences, the more chances somebody else may have a reason to leave their own place and, leave that place of depression and move out, because they're seeing it. Hey, I relate to her, but I'm not going to relate to him. But hey, I relate to that person, And so you never know which, like they've said in church before, but you never know which person, there you are. You never know which person you're going to relate to. You never know which person is going to be your person. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. You never know which person is going to be your person. You just never know. And you never know who is listening to you. You never know who is watching you. Mm-hmm. And so you're not just fighting depression and suicide for yourself. And I know it seems kind of hard, just like I'm tired of fighting for other people. I want to, you're fighting for yourself, but you never know who is also tagged to your own type of victory per se.
Yeah.
And so just, it's cool. It is so much, a victory becomes so much more valuable when it's a victory, not just for you, mm-hmm. Other people are tagged into it. So I love that part of it. Let me see, man. What are some ways that folks who believe that they might have slipped into a mild depression or gone into it, what are some ways or some things that they can do to start to fight it, and start to fight against it and start to go literally in the other direction? What are some things that folks can do?
I think the first one is always to be around people. The enemy uses depression as a way of isolation, right? Mm-hmm. So when lions, hyenas, tigers, when they hunt, their method of hunting is you find the weakest prey and you isolate the prey from the pack, right? So that's what the enemy does. The enemy is going to separate you, and isolation is a way that the enemy can continue whispering sweet nothings into your ear and play with your head, where you start believing these truths that are not true about you. Mm-hmm. And the biggest way to combat that is to be around people. So you have to be intentional. As much as you don't feel like being around people and you're not in the mood, be around people and then start talking about what it is that has you depressed. So if it's heartbreak, if you went through a relationship that was heartbreaking when you broke up, it was devastating. I'll give you an example. Pastors, right, who go through public breakup, in a church, man, they deal with depression, but they don't deal with depression because they have to still lead their flock, or they have to appear strong, because anything other than that is a sign of weakness. And how can they now lead the flock as a shepherd if they got to now process their emotions in front of people? Right. So they are fighting manic depression, not just mild depression, like manic depression, because there's nobody they can talk to. They can't even go to their pastor friends sometimes, right? Because their pastor friends are struggling with it themselves and they don't want to talk about it either.
Hush, hush.
Yeah, everything is hush, hush, right? And that's what depression is. It's about keeping you not in the presence of people and in I don't really want to say this, but in positive energy, right? In an energy where spaces where joy is there, right? Or where there is love, right? The Bible tells us where love is, it casts out everything else. There's no room for fear, anxiety, doubt, none of that stuff, right? Yeah. Love is supposed to occupy the room and displace everything else in that room. So if you're in a place of depression and you're trying to fight it, the first recommendation is to find yourself a company of people that you can trust, that you can be in, right? Find an activity. Even if you don't want to be around people, rock climbing, something, roller skating, scuba diving, something that will get you out in a social setting, because we are human beings. We're meant to be social. We're not meant to be isolated by ourselves. It is not healthy for our psyche. It is not healthy for us emotionally either. So being by yourself is a threat, and you're feeding depression if you're by yourself, right? Secondly is to talk about it. Be open about the things that you're struggling with, right? Because you never know, as you were saying just now, who went through what your struggle was and is that step ahead of you that can offer you advice or offer you some sort of support that can help you along your journey, right?
Yeah.
And then 3 is reading. You need to do some reading, so you need to gain some knowledge about what's you're dealing with. You need that knowledge. We're not all born innate with everything, right? All the tools that we need. So you need to start reading so you can understand where you are. There are different forms of depression, different levels of depression. So you need to amass that understanding and that wisdom about what you're dealing with. You could never fight an enemy you don't know or you don't understand.
Yeah. At that point, it's a setup. That makes
Sure is. You're set up to fail.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like, just thinking of what you're saying. I was just talking to my best friend earlier today, and clearly, some of the stories we just go back to ourselves through high school, and it's just like whenever you walk into a classroom and you know good and well you had a test, and you know good and well you could have spent time being like well versed in what you're about to be challenged on. You could have gave yourself a fighting chance. It's hard material, but you could give yourself a fighting chance if you learn ahead of time. Find out ahead of time, do the work ahead of time. It's less of a shock. Oh my gosh, I had no idea this would be on there. You would have known if you would have done some research, done some work, done some, ahead of time work. You mentioned something about staying social. You mentioned that earlier again, and staying, active with those around you. What are some pandemic safe ways for people to remain social and to use that as a tool to fight against depression?
What I've noticed is there are different activities that people were going out to do. So paint and drink, that's an activity where you can now do it on Zoom. You can join a club where you're drinking some sort of beverage or alcohol or whatever it is, and you're painting, right? So you're in a social setting. There have been wine clubs or book reading clubs that have gone virtual. So there's a lot of different activities that you couldn't do or that you can't do because of the pandemic that have decided to become innovative in their approach and have gone online, have gone virtual. And because they're realizing that this social component is missing during the pandemic, right? And social is not just within your family. Social meaning you have a culture, you have a society. A society means that there's more than the nucleus of the family.
Right.
So you need to interact with people that are outside of your family. And the way you do that is to find these clubs. So go to Facebook and just start looking for different clubs and looking for some of the activities that you were doing. Obviously, you can't roller skate, on Zoom unless you have a basement that's wide open, right? And you can set up your camera and you can stream your stuff, and a bunch of you get on there and you guys have fun.
Yeah.
But if that's not available to you, you have to find other ways and other methods. Things like doing puzzles, word games. Just imagine playing what's that? The miming game, not the miming game. Charades. Just imagine playing charades over Zoom. I mean, that's fun, right?
That in a while, yeah.
And then going to a community with new people. So now you're meeting new people and you're engaging and you're being social. That's the point, right? So just go to Facebook and look these groups up. They're out there.
Yeah. Right when I asked the question, didn't even remember this. I have an app, and I'm gonna share it. I'll let you guys see it. It's called Meetup. And Meetup is really cool for different folks and groups. I downloaded it because I moved to Atlanta, and I was like, what's around? What's happening? What are these groups around here? And Meetup is really cool. You can kind of go and see which, like just for instance, I saw a, adult soccer league, this and that. It had a kickball league, a Black women's kickball league in Atlanta. And I was like, when Rona goes away and when the sun comes out, I'm there, because you guys know good well kickball is in my heart, and a lot of other, if they have a tetherball team, I'm there too. Tetherball, foursquare, kickball. That's it. But what they've done on Meetup, let me see if I can. That's what right at the top. That's what the logo looks like. That little sketchy M. What they've done on Meetup is that a lot of those things that were meet in person only, now if you go through and look for your area or just wherever with that topic, you're going to find virtual this, virtual that, virtual this, Zoom parties,
Nice.
that. So they're having all these things that were, you know, hey, we're a chess club. Hey, we're gaming community. Hey, we're a so-and-so. They have all these dope things, but now they have like almost 70 to 80% of them are virtual, you know? But it just takes time to look for these things.
Yeah.
And I did not think about it until you just started talking about look for these groups. And I was like, oh my Lord, I have a resource for that too. So I know Meetup, it's another website that you can go and do events through.
Eventbrite?
I said events, fail. Eventbrite. Eventbrite already have virtual stuff, but now just like this, they've amped up their virtual side too.
Yeah.
So it's just, and on that note, as we name more and more options for people to use to fight against depression, what is it? And I don't even know if this is an answerable question or if it's the same for everyone or not. What is it? What is that hump? What is that final hump that really blocks people from pushing past? Because look, if I said, hey, tonight after Zoom, after this live, we're going to have a Christmas carol and charades party because we want to fight depression. All you have to do is click and come on and join the party. What is that hump that still makes people and pushes people to say, no, I don't want to, or no, I'm not feeling that, you know, or no, I can't. What is that hump? Like, is that even a question?
It is. It's a great question, actually. So I will address it in two ways. One, if you're isolated by yourself, it's easy to reject the norm, right? It's easy to reject the medicine or not take your medication, right? So that's number one. But as a man of God, the only perspective I can come from is that it's a spirit, right? So you're not fighting something that you have the right tools to fight with if you're not dealing with it from a spiritual realm. It's not something that's natural, right? It's a spirit, right? So it attaches to people, and then it's like an anchor, and it starts pulling you down. Right. So you have to learn how to untether yourself from it. There are very normal psychological tools and normal common sense tools that you can use. But then when you're talking about people that are, you know, years have been dealing with it and they have to go to the point of medication, you're talking about a deeper, more severe form, and that's really where the spiritual warfare comes in. So getting into that spiritual realm and starting to deal with it from that perspective and understand that it's not you. You weren't born as a depressed baby, right? That's not a thing, right? A depressed baby wasn't born. So it's something that happened to you through either your childhood or somehow something attached to you and became familiar to you. And we call them familiar spirits, right? So a familiar spirit became known to you and it started influencing the rest of your life, and you need to be able to shake that. And as the Bible tells us, some weapons of warfare are not carnal. So the book knowledge isn't always going to get you there. You're going to have to start praying. You're going to have to get to the point where you have to pray this through.
You still, okay. Question on that, man. And I think my husband and I jumped into a conversation today about this. And it's funny that this came up. We were talking about how for those who are in church, and no, this is not, this is not a Bible study night, but this, I feel like I know those who are at least in my immediate crowd and those watching are definitely churchgoers or at least familiar with it. I feel that for our generation or for our, level where we're at, our parents above us, they dealt with life according strictly to church, basically. So my day-to-day life was church. How I dealt with this through church, how this was applied through church. And so all those things. So when practical things came up, you know, like you and I talked about last night afterwards with Joyce, you know, sex education, relationships, vulnerability, things like that. When those things came up, church did not apply to them. And so they did not get, quote unquote, dealt with. What for those, because here's the thing, you have those who are not willing to maybe deal with it, or who are refraining from dealing with depression because it is not, because it has been pushed on them that the only way to deal with this is just go to church. And I feel like that is a discredit to how depression can be dealt with in a holistic type of manner. What are some things that can be shared to those who have used, what are some things outside of just pray about it? And, you know, I understand the root of it. Yes, it is a spirit, and I'm well aware of that. And I know that there are those who do understand that as well. What's the other side of that that people can attach onto that, you know?
I think you answered your question. So it's a holistic approach, right? If you're just approaching it from one perspective, and it depends on the severity of the depression, right? So as we talked earlier, some forms of mild depression or even manic depressive behavior is learning to unlearn behavior, right? Recognizing patterns. So when are you under attack? When do you feel these swings in, these huge swings in emotion? Are they linked? We talked about the weather earlier. Are they linked to the weather? So what things can you do to offset that change, right? So you know winter is coming, you know fall is coming, you know these seasons are changing, right? So, you know, are you going to link an activity? Are you going to link something that you can do that will bring you into a place of joy and happiness, so you're not focused on the depressive state of, you know, the sun going down earlier, and that your circadian cycle changing, and all of these things that will affect you, right? So it's being proactive. So again, it's unlearned behavior and learning new behavioral patterns that can affect that. And then learning what other ways that you're vulnerable, what other ways that you're open, that, you know, the depression comes in. So what are these doors and windows in your life that depression comes through? Is it bad news? Is it that when you get bad news, you break down, and when you break down, you go into a vulnerable state, and in that vulnerable state, depression attaches? Right? Is it a loss of a job? You didn't get the bonus, relationship breakup, car accident? What are these things? And when you start identifying and you look back at patterns, I honestly believe a lot of things comes back to looking at yourself and evaluating patterns. So if you look at those patterns and saw where these windows were open and these doors were open in your life, you shut these windows and shut these doors. So those are the practical tools I can give you. From a holistic approach, if you're trying all of these things and they're not working, you have to bring in the spiritual, at least to give it a shot. I mean, you know, if you're giving everything else a shot, you know, give the spiritual aspect a shot, right? And give it a real go, not just, oh, well, I'm going to try this, you know. Give it a real go, and follow the instructions given to you, or the direction given to you. I promise you, they're not going to ask you to go jump in a pool of water 3 times and sprinkle this on your head. That's not how it works.
I'm not done. Right.
You know, so it's not mumbo jumbo and hocus pocus. It's legit stuff. So if you go to somebody that's legitimate, and that's their gifting in helping people move through that issue, you know, they will work with you and help you develop a strategy along with secular things that you can do, right? It's a holistic approach, because at the end of the day, you're not praying every day, right? You're not in the spiritual realm every day. We're not spiritual beings. We're human beings, right? We live in a tangible world. So you can't assume that you're in this ethereal state at all times. And I don't want anyone to believe that. That's not true. Right. So
in the flesh at some point.
yeah. You got to eat, you got to drink, you got to sleep. Right. So these are things that you have to do naturally. So practicing those tools, you know, getting yourself in circles that, you know, help build you up emotionally, so you're not emotionally depleted. Doing activities that also motivate and generate some sort of energy or your chemical system changes, right? So depression is linked to imbalances in the brain with chemical reactions to adrenaline and other emotions that cause emotional mood swings. So knowing how what activities can actually spike those, that's when I say reading is important. So you read up about it, you understand what types of activities or things that you can do that are linked to affecting the specific chemical system or chemical imbalance of the brain and the body that puts you in places of depression.
Right. Whew. I feel like I'm getting seeing a pattern just for a lot of the talks that have already been had, as far as communication, forgiveness, family dynamics, loss, death, and any marital issues and things like that. There is such a level of self-awareness that has to be in place if you want to. Man, yeah. Like if there was a person who was just chill about everything in life, and all of a sudden they just had all these conversations, do you know how like heavy their plate is? That they're like, wait a minute, I have to do all these things, I need to check all these vitals, I need to check blah 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 blah. If they haven't been doing that at all,
yeah,
like yeah. Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, I mean, a lot of us walk through life that way. We're nonchalant about things, and to be honest with you, those that have malintent, that's who they prey on. Those are the ones that get conned in scams, right? Get their money, lose the entire retirement, right? Fall for things that are too good to be true, right? Or repetitively over and over and over again end up in relationships where this person is abusive because they're gravitating towards a type A personality, right? Because that's who they saw either as a father figure or in their community or as a way of safety or survival, right? So they gravitate towards a certain type of personality, not looking at how destructive or codependent their relationship is with this type of personality and why they're doing it. So if they're not doing this self-work to try and figure this out, they're going to end up in that situation consistently over and over and over again.
Right.
My camera's acting up. I don't know what's going on. Sorry.
No, you're good. I'm going to cut that one out. For some reason, it's doing. Oh, no wonder. All right. Let me see. Is there anything else you want to add on depression before we move over into the suicide side?
Yeah. So I speak from a place of experience when it comes to depression, right? When I got divorced, I equated depression to being worse than holding my mother's hand when she died from pancreatic cancer. My mom passed away from pancreatic cancer, and I was there every stage. I took her to chemotherapy. I took her to all her appointments. And then I watched when we had to put her in the hospice when she degraded, and to the point when we got that call that night, because we were there all day that day, we got the call, you guys got to come down here. And I had to sit there and hold her hands and beg and, go through that process of, yeah, that was painful. But my divorce put me in a place of hurt far greater than that.
Wow.
And I know maybe I was secure in the fact that I knew my mother was a great person. She lived a great life. She opened my eyes to, a relationship with God and what that looked like. So I was secure in where she was going. I wasn't worried. And she lived a well life. She lived in 3 different countries, raised kids in 3 different countries, 5 kids on her own. Right. So I was secure in, who she was. So I think maybe that's why it didn't destroy me as much as it did. But she was the pillar of my life. No father. That was my mother. Right. My mother and father. But going through my divorce put me in a place of depression where I was held there for 3 months of my life. I disappeared from the world. I did not communicate with the world for a year. I was not on Facebook. I was not on any form of social media. I was not talking to friends and family. I stepped down from the position I had at my church. I literally stepped down. I was an elder at my church and stepped down. Thank you by the grace of God that now I'm back. I'm in a different church, and I'm functioning as a minister. But I went through it. Right. And I purposely secluded myself, and I needed to do that self-work. And that journaling and that stuff that I talked to you about last night, and knowing each of my emotional states only came because I decided to do the work. But for the first, there was a point there for 3 months, I was crying every day. I was thinking about the loss. I was thinking about, now my kids are going to grow up in a in a divorced home, having to go back and forth between 2 houses and co-parenting. And, you know, Christmases aren't going to be the same. Thanksgiving isn't going to be the same. I was going through a whole lot of guilt and shame and all of this stuff, man. And I was under it. I was under it for a long time, man. And I had to snap out of it. And I think, knowing that I always had purpose, and knowing that this pain had to be, it couldn't just be for the purpose of pain. It had to be for the purpose of something, right? Yeah, so I kept saying to myself, there will be purpose in my pain, and God's going to give me purpose in my pain. So that was kind of my light at the end of the tunnel kind of situation. Right. I couldn't see it then. I was drowning in it. And I just couldn't understand it, but I knew that there was going to be better to come. And I couldn't skip any steps, right? So depression has a way that it will hold you down. Now, for those who don't have religion or a good support system or therapy or any other forms that can help them, that's where the suicide part comes in. Because literally for 3 months, I felt like every time I was by myself, oxygen was being sucked out of the room. Like I couldn't breathe, right? That's how it feels. And that's how you feel when you want to commit suicide. You feel so far under that there's no hope. And all you want to do is to end this cycle, end the pain. You're better off. The world is better off without you. They won't miss you, right? At least the pain will stop, because it feels like you can't breathe. Literally, like you cannot breathe. When I say depression is a physiological disease or issue or problem or mental condition, it is. Your body feels depression. And you can go through panic attacks and literally put yourself in a position where you're hyperventilating because of depression. It's real. Right? And people want to end that pain. They can't deal with it. It's a drowning of the soul. It's not a literal physical drowning. It's a drowning of the soul. And when you can't touch your soul or pull your soul and slap your soul and say snap out of it, and you can't do that and wake your soul up, that's why you want to just end it.
Wow, man. Hopefully later on, I want to get a crisis suicide hotline, crisis call folks on here, because I want to hear from them the type of conversations that they've had to have with those who are immediately in those crises, you know. And I know that you have had that at some point as well.
Yeah, my very first, man, it was something else, man. I was a young deacon, just getting my feet wet in ministry. And I was at the church late at night, taking care of some electrical stuff, setting up some new speaker arrangements or whatever it was I was doing. Right. And I got a call at the church. Pick up the call. The person starts telling me all about their problems and they're suicidal. I'm like, what? So I called the pastor. I said, can you hang on a second? Call the pastor on my cell phone. I said, Pastor, I just got a call on the line that this person is suicidal. He said, well, you're up.
Woo. Be ready.
And boy, did I have to grow up real quick from a spiritual perspective. And it wasn't no joke. And my pastor, I don't know, the Holy Spirit must have known what he was doing, because he knew it was time for me to deal with this on a real level. So it was my first encounter with someone who is suicidal. And I had to talk that person through it. I never heard from them again. They never called the church back again. But I was on that phone for about 2 hours with that person. And I believe that the Holy Spirit helped me move that person from a place of suicide to survival. So yeah, I've had my encounters and a fair share of experiences with it.
What were some of the things that you were speaking to him on the phone that you were having to say to try to turn that?
This person was consistently facing trials, and they had the kind of a woe is me kind of mentality. So they were familial issues, that they were always, being blamed for things, the black sheep of the family. And they didn't really did any work to see with themselves what they were doing to cause some of this. So they were at fault for some of the things, right? Some of their behavioral patterns and things that they were doing, but would fall into the woe is me and I'm a victim mentality. I couldn't really address that because I knew I didn't have the time. And if I addressed it, that it would aggravate the situation. So it was more of helping them listen to them and let them talk their way through it and self-medicate themselves, really, because they knew they had a victim mentality. Because at the end of the conversation, they were saying things like, I know that I can sometimes come across like this, or I can sometimes do these things. So it's kind of guiding the discussion and kind of guiding them by asking them pointed questions that will help them move to that space without directly dealing with it. If I had time and opportunity, if I was their therapist or coach or whatever the case is. So doing, that was really the work that I had to do. I had to be there to listen to them and listen to their concern and let them speak. And I think that's something we don't often do, because when we're in the know, we often want to say the right thing or point out where we know or see the faults in individuals.
Yeah.
Because we see it every day. We see it repeatedly over and over and over again. So we've got the answer. But sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's about letting them get to that point. And when you do that, it's actually it's beneficial to them.
For them to walk there. What that made me just think about is when you and I talked afterwards last night, and this is a kind of a side story with it. I used to teach preschool, and one of the things one of the things I wanted to do before my kids left my classroom is to teach them how to make their own beds, like I said. And just you saying what you mentioned right now about leading people to do that. I saw a lot of other teachers who all they would do is just make the bed for them and, say, get on the bed and go, let's nap time. One of the things that I would do is to, first I'd start off by doing 3 corners and I'd help them put on 1. Then, once they mastered that, I'd do 2 corners and I'd help them kind of do 1, and I'd wait for them to do their own, the 4th one. Then after that, I kind of go from this and go to that, until by the end of the day, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm making my bed by myself. No way, dude. That's amazing. And kind of walking that through. What are ways if people feel like they are fighting not just depression, but also suicidal thoughts or suicidal tendencies, or, attempts and things like that, what are some things that they can do in their own work? I know you've already mentioned a lot of them, but just to kind of pull those main things out, what are some things they can do to help, what are those little stair steps that can kind of lead them out of it themselves? Help to do that. They are on the phone. They aren't, calling just yet. We hope that they do, but they're not just calling yet. What are maybe some things that they can do on their own to build those stair steps out?
I think one of the first things are to look for the positives, or look for the things that are opposite of where they are, right? So if you're sad or you're failing at things, what are the successes? What are the areas that you do well in? What are the things that bring you the most amount of joy?
Right.
And when you start recognizing them and then giving yourself credit, right, for some of these things, that's a great way of combating a depressive mindset or depressive state.
Yes.
So starting to give yourself credit and recognizing who you are or what you bring to the table, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not just the affirmations alone, but real things. Like if you're a mom, right, and you have 3 kids, recognizing that your kids are not, none of your kids are begging on the street. Nobody is, being called by social workers. Your mm-hmm. kids are fed.
Yeah.
They're healthy. And things are well. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, you're good, man. Yeah. I on that note though, if you're watching, I know one exercise that you just mentioned, like that, start a notes page in your phone. And I think Joyce mentioned it yesterday on the topic of marriage. Just start naming, if you are getting to the end of your day, names, and you're trying to start a conversation with your significant other. But in the terms of this tonight on depression and suicide, to get to the end of your day and name, 2 to 3 things that bring you joy. Name 2 to 3 things that you are good at. Name 2 to 3 things that you are able to point out. So Gerald's definitely got a point that is, like I said, doable and easy. Like, I can see myself sitting down and saying, okay, good. The house is not on fire today. Okay, cool. The baby took a nap today, albeit 20 minutes. Hey, I got her to take a nap today. Anything like that. That is an easy, doable, digestible, that can happen step.
Another thing is to, sorry, I was transitioning from one location to the other.
No, man.
Another thing is to create attainable goals, right? So when you're in, any organization, that's one of the biggest things they teach you. Never make goals that are unattainable, right? So you have to make goals that are attainable. It's like when you're trying to pay off debt, there's 2 ways. It's either the snowball effect or you go the other way around. So you attack one debt at a time and you pay it off, and you feel the success of doing something that, brought you, said, hey, I did it, right? I accomplished it. You feel the accomplishment, right? And it's the same way with when you're looking at depression. Create an attainable goal. So if you're that you're in a depressed state, let's create an attainable goal. I want to make one friend or be in one social setting by the end of this week or this month.
Okay. Right.
So you're creating a goal that is linked to moving you out from a space of depression. So it's dealing with the things you need to do, which is to be social and to do an engaging activity that creates or changes the chemical imbalance in your brain. So that goal is set. So now let's work towards that goal. It's not a crazy goal. It's not like you're saying, I need to meet 100 people or have 2,000 friends on Facebook by the end of the week. That's an unattainable goal.
No, man, that's stress right there.
Exactly, right? I'm gonna climb Mount Everest by the end of the month. No, that's not an attainable goal. Yeah. So you create these attainable goals, and then you check them off one by one, and then that feeling of accomplishment starts putting you in a place. And the more consistent you are with these types of activities, the less you are. And it gives you the opportunity now to free you up, that your mind isn't weighted, so you can start doing the work. You can't do any work when your mind is heavy. Forget about it. It's not happening. Right? So if you're not in a good place mentally or emotionally, what work are you going to do on yourself? What work are you going to try and start, parsing through? What notes are you writing? None. You're not writing anything.
Yeah.
You're caught in the midst and the grips of the depression. So you're not writing, doing, trying, introspecting, nothing. You're doing none of those things except being fully in that space of depression. So when you start doing these goals that start giving you these, these milestones, as you start feeling better about yourself and you start moving in a different space, now you can start tackling this introspective effort to try and figure out what is going on with you. Where are these doors and windows of opportunity that depression seems to latch onto or seep into? It's a leech. It's a leech, right? And it has to, leeches thrive on wounds. So if you have a wound, it's going to attach to that wound and suck the living daylight out of it. And that's what it does.
Leeches thrive on wounds. I ain't heard that one yet. That makes sense. That makes sense in the worst way possible.
It does.
I'm thinking back. No, all bad. Like, I'm thinking back to when I was a kid and I would, get a cut on my finger or scrape myself or something. And if I wanted to do something afterwards, let's say I get a cut on my finger. Oh, my battery. And I, want to go play afterwards. Well, I'm going to feel that cut. What I would do, I don't know why, but what I would do is when I'm not trying to do anything, I would exercise and stretch my finger. That way I would just get used to feeling that cut. That way, when I did feel, something happen or whatever, I wouldn't be so stunned by it. Because I think that's what irked me, was like, I hated being surprised by that feeling. So I would purposely so that way when I did feel it, it wouldn't be so like, man, this is terrible. And I feel like the more familiar that I became with the wound, as you said, the less of a shock, or less of a type of attack that I would get from the pain from feeling it, randomly whenever it would happen.
That's
So
interesting.
I know, a strange creature I am. I feel like familiarity with our wounds is one of the best ways to, according to what was said last night, family dynamics, forgiveness, all these things, familiarity and understanding of our wounds is one of our best tools to fight against anything we've named. Like, swear, like,
I agree. But I would also caution that there is a level of familiarity that's dangerous, in the sense that it desensitizes and numbs you to the effect and the danger of that wound, right?
how do you know if you
And
got
you
it?
just get, when you when certain things don't bother you or affect you the way it used to, right? So in your scenario, you were saying that you would flex the finger or the injury so that when you needed to perform, it didn't bother you. The danger in that, from a psychological perspective, is that you're transferring, right? You're taking the pain and you're transferring it for a purpose.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone may know how to come back and deal with it after, because you have to perform. So here's the thing about depression, right? Moms, dads, or any parent, right, that go through a divorce or go through something traumatizing like postpartum depression or a loss of a baby,
Right.
because you got a job, because you have things to do, you don't have the time to process the emotion, right? You have other children that survive, or children that you have to take care of now and co-parent. So
Right.
this time to set aside to look at yourself and be introspective is not there. So you just push through it, right? You make yourself get used to the pain and you just push through it.
For the sake of
So
work. Yeah.
for the sake of work, for the sake of the children, for the sake of your sanity, because you in your mind, you're like, if I deal with this now in the middle of this project, this multi-million-dollar project that I'm working on, I'm gonna fall apart.
Crash and burn.
And
Right.
if my kids see me fall apart, then they're gonna fall apart, and then I'm gonna fall apart again. So you just deal with the pain, right? You kind of flex it, and you just, become familiar with it, and you just move on. And that's where it becomes unhealthy, because it's now a pain that you've normalized. It's not supposed to be there, right? A fracture is not normal, right? Any kind of trauma is not a normal thing. Human beings are not supposed to experience trauma, whether
Right.
it's physical, mental, physiological, sociological, cultural trauma. All of these forms of trauma, they're not supposed to be experienced. So whenever you normalize something, right, you're creating a dangerous area there if you're not going back to deal with it, right? So yes, you're in survival mode, right? You're homeless. You and your kids are homeless, or you and yourself is homeless. So I never had time to parse why my father kicked me out the house, or you never had time to think about why your aunt that you love so much did X, Y, Z and got you fired from a job,
Yeah.
right? So you got to work, you got to move, you got to think, you got to act, react. So you never had time to deal with it. So you normalize the pain, and you're just like, oh, that's how people are. That's how people are going to treat you. And
Yeah.
you just toughen up and, move on. No, you do that for the moment because you have to survive. You have to get through it. But when you're through it, you have to go back and revisit it, because if you don't, that's where it becomes a trigger. That's where it becomes an issue, and you face it again.
Right. I'm gonna have to wrap it up. I just realized what time it was. I moved my time on there. I feel like we've shared a lot, that we went over a lot, and you've shared a lot of great information and a lot of great perspective on depression, on suicide. And I definitely believe that, like was said earlier, there are some easy ways to start to fight, to identify, number one, fight against depression, and to curve, like make that curve away from depression and away from and away from allowing depression to turn into suicidal thoughts or temptations, attempts. I didn't do it. I didn't send it earlier. I'm putting on here the crisis text line for suicidal hotlines in the US. I'm going to put the text line, and I'm also going to do the phone call line. I think it's cool they have a text line. You know, everyone, just in any general, you know, nature, if you call someone, they're like, oh my gosh, just text me. Like, I don't do phone calls. Everyone does not do phone calls. I get it. They have a text line. You can text home to 741-741. And I'm going to put this here at the bottom so you guys can have that, if I could spell the word text. All right. Yeah. So you're going to just text the word home. And guess what? You can send this to a friend too. You can send this to a family member. You can show, you know, you can send this information to them because, like I said, you never know who is dealing with what, you know. Boom, let's do that. Yeah, so you can text home to 741-741 if you feel like you are dealing with a crisis or, you know, dealing with suicidal attempts and or thoughts. There we go. And also the number to call is on there. Let me see. They have a couple different ones, so actually I'm not going to put that on there. They got a couple different ones. I'm going to just leave up the text one. But yeah, I think that is a great resource. I think that listening to information that you've given tonight, Gerald, is definitely important to remember, to retain, and to apply. The most important part of that is to apply it, because it's one thing to see the help, it's another thing to apply it to your own life and really do the work. So I definitely appreciate you, Gerald, for stepping in and really coming back on from last night to share again on this topic and to really shine light on it for those who might be dealing with it, man. So I appreciate you 10,000, 100%, bro, you know.
Thank you again for the opportunity. And I just want to close out by saying that depression literally is a silent killer.
Yeah.
You know, it is. You don't realize what the person was dealing with until they're gone, right? And then everyone's like, I didn't know. And that's how the funeral goes. Did you know he was struggling with this? Did you know they were struggling with this? Or did you know that they had suicidal thoughts or anything like that? And it catches everybody by surprise. It is truly a silent killer. So bringing exposure to it, talking about it, engaging in conversations about it, and unmasking it from being a silent killer, I think is a great way to deal with it.
Bring it to the light. All right, man. Thank you again so much for coming on and sharing. Thank you guys for those of you who watched, who engaged. Say, if you are a believer, say a word of prayer for anyone that you think who might be dealing with it, anyone who you do or don't know who might be dealing with it. You just never know how far that can go. If you're not a believer, you can become one. But also just send out what you know people need at this time. You know they don't need to deal with anything else here, and there. You know what? But be an encourager to people. Send out that good stuff. You're going to get that good stuff. You know what I mean? Be the light that somebody needs, you know, because you don't know what darkness that they're dealing with, you know. So hope you guys enjoyed it. We will be back next week for the final week of Healing for the Holidays, the first presentation of Captvate TV. So we will have on day 1 is goal setting, day 2 becoming well, and day 3 intentional living. So those 3 are coming up. I'm excited. January's here, whether we thought she was coming or not, because January's a girl right now. Whether we thought it was coming or not, it's happening. So let's get ready. Let's get prepped. 2020 was a doozy. 2021, I know we can't just say just because it's 2021 it's going to get better. Now we got to want it and work to get it better. You know, to want it to be what we need it to be. So with that said, guys, good night. Thank you for watching on Captvate TV, where everything we bring you is worth your time. All right. Be safe and good night.